All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mark Molina, CEO of Molina Leadership and Business Development Solutions. Today, we're excited to have with us James Clevenger. He is one of the candidates for the Lane County District Attorney race. And I'm going to begin with reading his bio. James is both an attorney and a police officer, serving in both positions simultaneously. He has been a private attorney from 2009 to present. He is licensed in both Oregon and Washington. He served as a judicial clerk to U.S. District Judge Michael McShane from 2013 to 2017. He was a police officer, or he is a police officer in Oak Ridge, Oregon from 2017 to present. He was a police officer in Coburg, Oregon from 2014 to 2017. And he was a police officer in Junction City from 2010 to 2014, and a University of Oregon police officer or Department of Public Safety from 2010 to 2013. His educational background is he has been to the University of Oregon Law School. He has his doctorate of jurisprudence. He went to the University of Liverpool Law School, the LLM in International Human Rights. He received his undergrad from DePaul University in political science, and he has completed semesters of education at both Oxford and Harvard. His prior government experience is the University of Oregon Public Safety Advisory Group and the Oak Ridge Parks and Community Services Committee. James, thank you for being here today. We appreciate your time and making yourself available for this interview, for this current race for the district attorney office here in Lane County.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Very good. And I'd like to begin by offering you an opportunity to make an opening statement. You can have up to 2 minutes as to why you're running and things you would like the voters to hear about you and know about you that have never met you before.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm running for Lane County District Attorney because I've been a Lane County resident now for 15 years. Been in law enforcement for a little over a decade now. And in these small towns that I've served, Junction City, Coburg, and now Oak Ridge, I've seen how the system is broken, and I'd like to be able to fix that. We've noticed in dealing with crime on the streets, as a police officer, that cases just aren't getting prosecuted at rates that are acceptable to the community. In my current community of Oak Ridge, we're looking at like 20, maybe 25% of our cases actually getting prosecuted. And that's been a real problem. And citizens have been encouraging me for years to run because they hear through the grapevine that I'm also an attorney, and they're like, well, why can't you fix it? Why don't you run? And so finally I heard that call enough that I answered it and decided to run. Now that being said, I'm not saying what I want to do is throw everybody in jail, throw away the key. I think that our criminal justice system needs to be fixed so that it actually reflects our community's values. And I don't think that's happening either. I think we need to focus more on treatment programs, that's drug treatment and mental health, in order to reduce rates of repeat offenses. And I think that's the way a DA's office should be judged insofar as their success rate and what is the rate of repeat offenses. And that's something I think we need to spend more time and focus on. So in a nutshell, that's why I'm running. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Very good. Thank you very much. We'll get back. I'll ask you some questions about some of the things you mentioned in your opening statement. But first, let's let the voters know a little bit more about you. You've enjoyed policing in smaller communities. And you said your father is a retired police officer. And he was also a DHS investigator. And when you went to law school, you said you knew you had always wanted to be a district attorney. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was my original intention going through law school, is that I wanted to do that. But I clerked for Judge McShane in state court as well as federal court. And clerking in state court, I just watched the DAs, and especially the first few years of practice there, they're kind of pigeonholed into focusing on certain types of crimes like DUIs or or thefts or whatever. And I like to have my hands in everything if possible. And that's actually why I've worked at small police departments rather than large, because in large police departments, if you're a regular cop, you'll go deal with the crime, put a Band-Aid on it, but then you usually don't see things through. You don't get to do the investigation. That's going to be handed off to a detective, et cetera. And I like working in the smaller towns because you get to do all of that all the way through. And what drove me to doing police work full-time again is that I really felt that I was more able to help people directly in that role. I mean, obviously I took a huge pay cut getting out of practicing law full-time and getting into police work again instead, but it's more fulfilling to me. So that's why I decided to make that life change about 3 years ago. And I still get to dabble in the law a little bit part-time when I'm not working. So that's been fulfilling as well.
What year did you graduate at the University of Oregon Law School? I don't remember.
2008.
2008. And so you tell me some of the things you learned about law enforcement, the law, the perception of it as the son of a police officer in the family of someone who served as a DHS investigator. How were those years formative for you in what you're doing now?
Well, frankly, I don't know how my father has done it for so long. I mean, he's technically retired, but he keeps coming back on a part-time basis to help out DHS, usually as a supervisor in Bend. But, he focuses primarily on child abuse sex cases, some of them horrific, and I don't know how he has been able to handle that emotionally. And he was always very good at trying to protect us from having to deal with that emotional baggage that comes with that job. But his service to the community was something that I always admired and respected in him, and that's probably why I ended up following in his footsteps. We're both the type of person that likes to figure out how to solve a problem. Even in the micro level, there are times where I'll respond to a call because somebody's had. Well, I'll give you an example. Someone had their cane stolen, an older vet gentleman, and so I'm thinking, okay, well, how do I get this guy a new cane? I'm going to investigate the crime too, but I was able to post on Facebook on our community page in Oak Ridge, and within 30 minutes, I had 8 people that had canes willing to give him. And just being able to connect with the community and actually solve problems is more fulfilling. If you're the DA, a lot of times you're getting involved in these cases weeks later, and sometimes you don't have the ability to help people on the ground.
So why are you interested? I mean, you're licensed in Oregon and Washington State, but your primary service post law school graduation has been in law. I'm just seeing this in law enforcement in Oregon. Why are you licensed in both states? Do you have a practice, or you have clients that contact you? You said you grew up in Eastern Washington. You do legal business there too, as well as here?
Yeah, I have done some limited practice in Washington. Part of being a lawyer is that your family will contact you with all of their legal problems, and so the bulk of my family is still living in Eastern Washington, and from time to time they have legal issues that I have to deal with. So I've kept that license current in order to help them primarily, because believe me, that your phone will start ringing from family members once they know you're a lawyer, and they can get free services from you, or at least they think so.
And so just out of curiosity, does Oregon and Washington for an attorney, do they have reciprocity, or did you have to take the state bar exam twice?
I was able to get reciprocity after you practice a certain number of years. I think it was 4 years at the time I got reciprocity. I'm not sure, and that law has changed every few years, so I'm not sure what it is now. But yes, I was able to get reciprocity.
Oh, very good. Let's talk about a little bit. I'd like those that see this for the first time, hear a little bit about your experience, your educational journey to Oxford and Harvard. But let's begin with the University of Liverpool Law School, LLM, and International Human Rights.
Yeah, so I grew up in this small town in Eastern Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted to expand my horizons, so I moved to Chicago to do my undergrad at DePaul University, even though I'd never been to Chicago before in my life. And then I was working in county government there for the Cook County assessor for a couple of years, and knew I wanted to go to law school, but wasn't quite sure what area I wanted to focus in. Wasn't 100% sure if it was going to be worth the money, etc. So I decided to do the LLM program in England first, which is usually kind of backwards. Most attorneys, at least in the US, will get their Juris Doctorate first and then specialize with an LLM. But I actually did it backwards and got the LLM first in international law, focusing on international human rights. And that program gave me the opportunity to get a taste of law school and also just be able to focus on one area. And it was a wonderful time in my life. I got to meet attorneys from all over the world. I was the only American in the program, which put me in a strange position sometimes because they're asking me to defend the policy of the United States on various issues all the time, and felt more like a diplomat sometimes than a law student. But it was a lot of fun and gave me a lot of opportunities. So,
who was president at that time?
It was the second Bush presidency, so there were certainly some political conversations going around at that time.
And you said while you were at DePaul University, you were exposed to some amazing figures, public figures, people we have seen a great deal about in the news. You worked on the Gore campaign on his motorcade. You've worked with Mayor Daley. You worked with Governor Gloyevich.
Yeah.
You did some work for Rob Emanuel when you ran for Congress. You worked within the Springfield, Illinois to promote a bill, and you work with the up-and-coming unknown who would soon become the 44th or 45th president of the United States, Barack Obama.
Yeah, I kind of lucked out when I first got to Chicago. The Gore campaign was running, and I met the right people through dumb luck, frankly. And then I did some advanced team motorcades for him. Quite a few of them. He was in Chicago quite a bit at that time, and I even had him. There was a motorcade that was running late, and I was playing hockey on the DePaul University team, and I missed practice. So I had him write me a note to the hockey coach, which I still have, which is kind of funny. I think that was a pretty good excuse to miss practice. But yeah, just kind of fell into that, and then continued to work in politics in Chicago for a while. But I got jaded pretty quickly after a few years, and wanted to get back to the Pacific Northwest, and that's why I ended up coming back for law school. But I have great memories from Chicago. I mean, working with Barack Obama when he was just a state senator, he wasn't even a U.S. senator at the time, was pretty amazing. And looking back at those times, I realized how lucky I was to get to know him before he was the big shot that he is now. So yeah, had a lot of fun in Chicago, but wanted to leave, and glad I left when I did.
So let's talk about that experience a little bit because, Chicago is always front and center in the news media for one reason or another. What did you learn dealing with not only the advance team for the Gore campaign, Mayor Daley, Governor Gloyevich, Rob Emanuel, some of the biggest names in politics, and then State Senator Barack Obama. What did you learn about politics, how you influence it, how you affect it, how you participate? 'Cause I know you said that made you jaded, but I'm sure looking back, there were some real positives as well.
There were, and definitely felt those positives. When I was working with Obama on a bill, it was a property tax legislation that sounds boring, but the way education was funded in Illinois at the time was based on property taxes. So in other words, if you lived in a rich neighborhood, you could look around and see really nice houses, and you were getting a lot more funding for education. And the bill that we were working on was to level that playing field so that all the schools got the same amount of money equally. And then, of course, if school districts in rich neighborhoods wanted to add additional money to their school districts, they could do that through bonds, et cetera, school levies. There were options to do that, but at least there would be an equilibrium to begin with, so the funding would be fair to begin with. And so, yes, victories like that were helpful in my education and finding out how you get these kind of things done. The jaded part came around, when I was getting, screamed at by Blagojevich, which he's kind of famous for. That was not particularly helpful. And, and I saw the beginnings of some of the corruption and nepotism that has plagued Chicago, and I think it's been cleaned up quite a bit since. But I just, I'm a true believer. I'm an optimist. I don't like getting involved in shady politics, and there was echoes of that around. I think people knew that I didn't want to get involved in that, so I was never drug into it. But that's just those dark areas of politics were a lot more prevalent in Chicago, and I saw some of that, and definitely wanted to get back to the Pacific Northwest, where I think things are a little more pure, if you would.
So, and your involvement in politics in Chicago, was that your entire 4-year career at DePaul or just towards the end?
It was basically all the way through. Like I say, I just kind of luckily got involved in that Gore campaign, and then from there, I had experience at that point that made me marketable to other campaigns, and just kind of got roped into some. And then my primary job, when I wasn't politicking, was working for county government there for the Cook County assessor, who collects property taxes. Also happens to be the same guy that the Blues Brothers had to pay in the Blues Brothers movie. But that was, I did some political outreach in that job as well, but I was more of a kind of a special assistant, jack of all trades for the assessor himself, which was great because I got to follow him around and interact with constituents and taxpayers through that. So that gave me a lot of experience working in government at the county level.
So you graduate from DePaul, you want to go to University of Liverpool Law School. What was that? Did you have to apply? Was it a special scholarship? Did you have to write an essay? What was that like to be admitted to that school?
Yeah, it was your regular direct enrollment type of process. In full disclosure, I was a big Liverpool FC fan, and so part of the reason I went there is the soccer, but they also have a good law school as well, and they happened to win the Champions League the year I was there. I just want to put that in there.
Mm-hmm.
That was 2005 in the greatest Champions League final game ever played.
And how did you hear about that school?
I was just doing research on programs in England. I'd done a study abroad program in my undergrad at the University of Sheffield.
Mm-hmm.
And so I talked to people when I was there who were studying law as undergrads, because in England, you study law as an undergrad, and then you kind of have a apprenticeship program before you can become a solicitor or a barrister. And so I knew how the system worked there, and had heard that sometimes they would allow people into these LL programs who didn't have a law degree to begin with, as long as you had some pre-law classes. And I think, frankly, again, I was just lucky to be able to get in.
Mm-hmm. And so you said that was a 1.5 year long educational process in the University of Liverpool?
Yes.
And then upon graduation, did you apply immediately to University of Oregon Law School?
Oh, actually, no. I did my first year at Willamette Law School in Salem, and then transferred to the University of Oregon School of Law. Basically followed the scholarships at Willamette. They were very generous in that first year, but then I transferred. It wasn't quite what I wanted out of my law school experience, and so I transferred to U of O.
So you went to, you did a summer semester during law school at Oxford, and then you did on-site, and then you also did an on-site semester at Harvard in undergrad. Talk to us a little bit about why you wanted to go to those schools and what you learned.
Well, I wanted to get the best education I could, as I think everybody does. And in my opinion, those are the two greatest schools on earth, and I wanted to have some experience at them without having to pay the full tuition for, or be able to get in, frankly. But they will let you in if you're just taking classes. It was a direct enrollment for a semester at Harvard, because I wasn't seeking a degree, just taking classes, which then transferred over to my undergrad. So I was able to do that. And then the program at Oxford was through a summer law program,
Mm-hmm.
where again I would take classes that transferred back. But I wanted to go there because there were 2 Supreme Court justices that had studied law there at Magdalen College specifically, and I just wanted to have that experience. And it also happened to be where Harry Potter was filmed, the dining scenes, which was kind of neat, and I was big into Harry Potter at the time, so they may have played a small role in my decision to pick that specific college at Oxford.
You've had quite the journey of not just education, but travel from a young man. I'm from a small town in Texas, so I identify with you coming from a small town in Eastern Washington. I've been to Eastern Washington multiple times, so I know what that looks like.
Sorry.
You were president of your school. You said you were a hockey player in high school as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I played hockey and then played it through college as a walk-on on the DePaul team. And I don't know how good these cameras are, but if they're HD, you can probably see the stitches still on my face, on my chin. But
and so it's interesting to hear a young man out of Eastern Washington have such broader perspectives in the pursuit of broader horizons, that you would want to go overseas to the University of Liverpool, why you wanted to go to Oxford, why you wanted to go to Harvard. You follow the scholarships to Willamette, wasn't quite what you were looking for, so you transfer over to the U of O. This is all part of how, the human development, right? Psychological development, emotional development, our world paradigm. how we view our society. What was it? What were you looking to receive from the U of O Law School, and did you find it?
I did, and frankly, had I found U of O and Eugene, Oregon in general earlier, I may have just stayed here. Frankly, I think that we were all very lucky to live here. I consider this home, and I'll never leave. I spent a lot of time in my youth jumping around from city to city, and that was fun. But I call Eugene and Lane County home, and I intend to stay. But yeah, I think everyone should have that experience to move away from your hometown. You can always come back, but I think that you'll lose a chance to get perspective if you don't do that. So, and my mother, I grew up just with my mom as basically an only child to her, and we were lucky that we were able to do some traveling, and she always took me with her because, well, she had no other choice, no one else to watch me. So I think that helped broaden my mind as a kid.
That's really good. So now you're at the University of Oregon. You are serving on an advisory committee that works with the students, faculty, making staff recommendations on police matters to the university leadership. Talk to us a little bit about that experience and some of the issues that you, as a group, had discussion around, either helped the department grow, helped the university leadership grow, and maybe something you saw through to the end.
Yeah, so that was around 2004, 2005, while I was still in law school, and I was selected by the student body to be the graduate student representative for student government, but also on this committee specifically. And the University of Oregon Department of Public Safety was starting their transition towards becoming a police department. And one of the things they were trying to do, even before they became a police department, was to arm their officers with tasers. And I felt personally, and so did the students at that time, that was a little reckless to be handing out tasers to officers who are not fully trained as police officers. At that time they were not armed with anything except for pepper spray, and we just had concerns that they may be misused, and we certainly didn't want tasers being given to the officers without use of force plan that had input from the students, faculty, staff, everybody, but before they were given out. And at that time they were talking about, well, we'll give out these tasers and then we'll work on the use of force plan. And that just didn't make sense to us, to hand somebody something but not tell them when they couldn't use it. I think it was the cart before the horse sort of situation, and that's what I was against, and the students were against at the time, which later, came back to bite me a little bit when I started working for the University of Oregon Department of Public Safety, because a lot of the officers that were there in 2004, 2005 remembered that I was against that, and some of them took that as a personal offense that I was against them, and that wasn't the case at all. I wasn't against anybody individually, just the idea of giving out weapons is what they are. Because they can certainly inflict pain on people, and debatable whether or not it can contribute to someone's death. So I was seen at first by some officers when I joined the department as anti-police, and it certainly was never the case. And I believe I've been able to portray that accurately to my colleagues, that I'm certainly not anti-police. I've been a police officer now for more than a decade, but I think that there should be checks and balances on police departments, and that there should be civilian oversight of police departments. I think there should be the same kind of oversight on DA's office as well.
So you graduating 2008, you went straight into the DPS officer for the University of Oregon?
No, there was some time there. It's actually kind of funny. I have a picture with Barack Obama when he was running in 2008. I was doing his motorcades in Oregon, where I was talking to him about the upcoming bar exams. And I told him, I was real cocky at the time, I told him I was going to take the Washington bar and the Oregon bar at the same time, and they were 1 week apart. And in the picture, he's shaking his head, and what he was telling me at that time was that is not a good idea, because it's, you know, the tests were completely different in style, and then of course the law is different between the two states. Well, he was right, and I failed both of them. So then I had to wait and take the next bar in 2009 in Washington State individually, and then I passed, no problem. But you know, I should have listened to a guy who was, you know, running for president and been through law school and passed the bar himself, and not tried to bite off more than I could chew. But you know, like I say, I was cocky back then, and learned my lesson. So, you know, that was also a time in our economy where it was tough to get a job. So yeah, graduating 2008, failing the bar exam, both of them, but then I passed in 2009. And then I started getting into law enforcement started applying in 2009, got in at Junction City starting January 1st, 2010, and went through the Reserve Police Academy with them. I also worked at Serbu as a on-call group worker, basically if it were a prison, you'd call it a jail guard, but they call it an on-call group worker at the Juvenile Justice Center there as well. So got a small taste of working with incarcerated youth as well.
You know, leadership it's such a big thing. I mean, it's such a broad arena. James, what did you learn about yourself? How did you process not only failing the Washington State Bar, but the Oregon State Bar? What did that do to you internally? How did you overcome that moment in time? And then your strategy was to go take the Washington State Bar first, right?
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself? Because, you know, so much of life is dealing with people that are struggling and or failing, and the DA would do a lot of that. So what did you learn about yourself, your own nature, and what did you do to come out of that moment in time?
Well, it was definitely tough, but I learned that you can never give up, you know, and you've got to put the pieces back together sometimes when things fall apart. You know, there was a period of time there for a couple of years I was working like 3 or 4 part-time jobs to make it work, and sometimes that's just necessary to do that. And so yeah, I feel for people when they're in similar situations, and I have no problem telling them my story, so that they can understand that you can pick the pieces back up. I mean, when I was, we haven't talked about it yet, but my situation with the University of Oregon Police Department when they fired me for reasons that were not true, you know, I had to file the lawsuit against them. And I think for most people that would be overwhelming. Luckily, I had a law degree to fall back on, and I could file the suit myself. But that was a 3-year process. You know, and first we had to go through arbitration, which I also won, and was ordered reinstated with back pay. And they kept coming after me, but I wouldn't let it go, and I wouldn't quit. Even when I got the job working in the federal court, which was probably the greatest job I will ever have, I still didn't quit, didn't drop the lawsuit because I knew that if I did, they would hurt other people
Mhm.
as well. So I couldn't just let it go. There were people that were honest, told the truth about what happened as witnesses, and I knew that if I had let that go and didn't see the lawsuit through, that they'd come after them next. So yeah, I learned a lot, um, and it's hard to be a crusader for what's right sometimes. That's probably that word's a little strong, but it's hard to stand up to power, and it's what I feel like I'm doing now again in running against an incumbent DA. I mean, it's never heard of. It's very rare that incumbent DA ever has anyone running against her. But again, I felt like I had to. She's just shortchanging communities and um, not being reflective of our community values.
So we're going to have a candidates forum just for those that are listening on Thursday. So I'm not ignoring what you're saying, but I want to save some of these other commentaries for the forum where Patricia Perlow can respond. So I'm not ignoring you. But let's talk a little bit. What did you learn about the process of law? This experience that you're mentioning now, that happened at the University of Oregon. You have a legally trained mind. You're a licensed attorney at this point in Washington. What did you learn about how uh, a legal situation could be misrepresented or could be untruth, lacking truth? And how did you navigate that with the best of intentions to get to the end destination?
Well, it was hard. A lot of prayer, a lot of soul searching throughout that process, because sometimes it seems like everybody's against you and there's no way to win. But sometimes you just have to persevere and keep fighting for what's right and believe that the truth will eventually come out, which it did. In a unanimous jury verdict, which included punitive damages against the defendants, which again is pretty rare, only in cases where the jury decides someone has done something very, very wrong and they want to assess specific punitive damages on individuals. Mm-hmm. So yeah, perseverance is basically just kind of what I learned to deal with. And, life is a struggle, and, I've seen other people go through it, and not everyone is able to cope as well as others. And but that's kind of, in a nutshell, that's what I learned is just, you've got to persevere.
What would be some of the greatest strengths if you're elected to as the next district attorney for Lane County? What would be some of the strengths that you would bring as the next DA?
Well, I think my commitment to transparency and openness is important. The current office is one that is a mystery to a lot of people. It's a mystery to me sometimes. Calling that office, sometimes it's hard to get a response, not only for myself as a police officer, which you think I'd be able to direct dial right in there. I can't. For victims as well. A lot of victims,
James, are you there? Okay, can you hear me?
Hi, Mark. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So you were talking about, well, what we can do some edits out of respect to that cut in the internet. Then that's been happening. So it's just the amount of people online. So let's go ahead and go back to the conversation. And the question posed to you was, what are some of the strengths that you would bring to the district attorney's office?
Well, I think my dedication to transparency, I think is something that it's really important. Uh, the DA's office has kind of been a mystery to a lot of people, to victims who try to call in to get answers. A lot of times they can't. Even to police officers, sometimes we can't get answers and understand how things are done, why they're done. So I think I would improve communication between the DA's office and law enforcement agencies. Some of the programs I'd like to implement is I'd like to give annual training to every single department in Lane County at their departments, because offering a training for everyone to come in is one thing, but these small departments, you still need somebody watching the city, and it's hard for a department of 5 people to all come into Eugene for a training. Whereas if the DA goes out to their department, they can meet everybody and educate everybody. And in my 10 years of law enforcement, I've never seen the DA at one of my departments. They've never been there to meet the officers, to train us, et cetera. So that's something I would like to do, is increase that line of communication with departments, so everyone's on the same page, same training, get the legal updates, et cetera. And I'm willing to do that. I realize I'm going to be quite busy as the DA, but I think I can spare a couple of days traveling around to all the departments to meet with them and train them. I also think it'll be good to have a fresh start, if you will, with the DA's office and our connection to elected officials in Salem. A lot of the things I want to do, like increasing mental health services for offenders and drug treatment, it's going to cost money. I think we can get that money from Salem, but we need to have someone like myself who's coming in with a fresh perspective. My opponent has opposed bipartisan bills like the juvenile justice reform legislation last year, which frankly angered a lot of state legislators, and that's why you'll notice there aren't many, if at all, supporting her from Salem, because things like that she's done that, again, do not reflect what Lane County citizens actually support. And so I think that I can come in and make and build new relationships with our state legislators in order to get us more funding in Lane County. I think we're not getting our fair share, and I think I'd be able to do that.
What other ways to your assistant district attorneys, to other programs? I want to hear you expand a little bit more, James, on your vision for improving how you would apply some of your strengths, some of your development of leadership to some other expanded areas.
Sure. Well, right now I've had plenty of friends that have worked for the DA's office, and some that still do. There's been a culture in that office where it's been viewed as you have to win, and if you're not winning, you might get fired. I don't view the DA's role as having to win every case. I believe the DA's role, or an assistant DA, is to put on the best case you can and let the judge or the jury make the decision as to guilty or not guilty, because that's their job. The DA shouldn't just be taking slam dunk cases. They should be working for justice. That's their role. And I would make sure that my assistant DAs know that they're going to be supported as long as they're doing the best job they can, and go ahead and take a risk on some of these quote unquote he said, she said cases. Let the jury decide. That's their role. to decide if he or she is being truthful and make the decision that way. So I'd like to change that. Also, it's been pointed out to me by a couple of people now inside the office that it's not a very diverse office. Of the assistant DAs, none of them are of color, and I think that we could use some diversification there to reflect our community. And in fact, the hiring process in general for assistant DAs is a little murky. From my understanding, sometimes some of them are hired just by one interview with the DA herself, and that's it. And some of them are hired through an ad hoc group that she puts together from time to time to do hiring. But either way, it's bypassing HR and the normal standard practices for hiring, which again goes back to transparency. And I would just like that to be a more fair and transparent process.
If you're elected to DA, what would be your vision on making that a different type of process? How would you train, recruit a more diverse assistant district attorney candidates and create some of this criteria that you're mentioning for some of these cases that you've just brought up?
Well, the first thing I would do is take advantage of the U of O School of Law's diversity hiring program, which my understanding is last year that the DA's office did not participate in. I don't know why. There may have been a good reason for that, but I would make that a priority to make sure that the DA's office was part of that program. And then I would just make sure that the hiring process in general was standardized and transparent.
Now that you've been through some things in your life, if you're elected to DA, the district attorney for Lane County, what are some of your areas of weakness that you know that you have that you would have to be prepared to confront?
Yeah. Well, obviously, I don't have the same amount of experience as my opponent, which has been there over 30 years prosecuting cases. And that's a fair criticism of me that I don't have that experience. What I do have is in the last 10 years, I have prosecuted cases. I don't know what other term to use, but at the Muni court level, I have represented the city in cases, either misdemeanor or crimes we turn into violations that were misdemeanors. So I'm still in the courtroom presenting cases, calling witnesses, filing motions, etc. And I realize it's at the smaller level. It's not the big time county courthouse, but I also know my way around courthouses. I worked in federal court and state court at the county level for the judge. I've been involved in 2 capital murder trials at the state court level. And so I do have a little more experience than sometimes my opponent wants to give me credit for. But it's true. I've never been practicing DA. And of course, I've never run an office that has an $11 million budget. I would point out that neither did she until she came into this role. And obviously, a lot of that $11 million kind of runs itself. It's not like I'm going to fire everybody and no one gets paid. A lot of that money is already earmarked for certain things. I think I would be successful in bringing in additional funding for the office. But again, that is an issue where I'm weaker in that I don't have that type of experience. But again, I kind of think a lot of it runs itself, and it's more about general vision of the office and priorities that is what the DA really does.
So if you had to raise some additional funding, what are some of your thoughts around that? How might that be accomplished?
Well, again, it's partnering with community groups for some of the alternative to incarceration type programs would be run through community groups. Like Sponsors is one of my favorite, which works on providing housing to folks when they're getting out of jail. That's obviously super important for people, because how are you going to succeed if you have no place to live the streets when you get out. So partnering with them and helping them succeed, helping them write grants. One thing I did in Chicago was I wrote a successful MacArthur Foundation grant for the tax policy forum, which again focused on making property taxes more progressive. So I have some experience in grant writing, a little bit with the parks districts that I've worked for as well. And then again, just getting more funding from the state legislature through partnerships with them, I think would make that successful.
Now, your law enforcement experience, you've had a lot of exposure to a lot of our smaller rural communities. How do you feel that that would help you be effective as a district attorney for Lane County, interacting with the concerns of the smaller rural communities?
Well, I mean, I think that I think you've kind of stated it in the question, is that small towns will be able to trust me because I feel their pain. I've felt it now for 10 years in 3 different small communities, and a lot of them, the small police departments are successful. You've got officers that know how to see a case all the way through, but sometimes they need additional help, such as computer forensic file manipulation, and that stuff, which is beyond me, and I certainly don't have the knowledge. I don't have the computer equipment to be able to analyze someone's cell phone to get some of that metadata, et cetera. And that's where you've got to build partnerships with other departments, other larger departments, and I think the DA can help make that happen. And it's something that frankly hasn't happened as often as it should, in my experience.
And I guess my final question for you, James, is how would you maintain continuity of relationship? Changing a district attorney, if you win, it's a big deal. How would you maintain continuity of relationship or building relationship and continuity of effectiveness with the sheriff, the sheriff's department, the jail, the other city law enforcement agencies? And if, Springfield has its own municipal jail here, what would be your vision and or methodology to reach out and to coalesce all that experience to remain effective?
Yeah, I think that'll be somewhat tough, obviously, with the sheriff, because from what I've seen and experienced, the sheriff is directly connected to the district attorney, and I think you can see that through all of her publicity type pieces. So there might be some conflict to work out there, but I think with the other departments, they're actually looking for a fresh change. I think a lot of people are afraid to say it because the DA is a very powerful position. You don't want to cross the DA. But I think you'll find once I get into office, all of the departments, I think, will be somewhat relieved to know there's someone in there that's new and is going to listen and try to put these coalitions together rather than play favorites, which is what seems to be happening now.
Well, we'll look forward to hearing from the both of you Thursday evening at the forum and let you guys have some interaction around some of these issues that are apparently part of the campaign. It's part of this process, the differences in perspective and paradigms. What would you like to say to those? For many people, I think this is the first time they're going to hear you or see you speaking as a candidate. What would you like to say to undecided voters or to the law enforcement community or leadership of all those that trust the district attorney's office? What final comments would you like to make to them?
Well, I would just encourage people to do their own independent research. I think there's quite a bit available on my website, but I think beyond that, I think it's helpful as a voter to look back at some of the old newspaper articles and read about things that have happened at the DA's office. It's a simple Google search. You can type in the DA's name and read what's happened, in the last 6 years that she's been at the helm. So again, I'm all about independence. I'm a very independent person, and I think that people should be making their own independent decisions too. And I just encourage people to do their own research.
If someone wanted to get a hold of you in your campaign after they see this video, how would they do that?
They can do so directly on our website, which is clevenger4da.com. And there's a link there they can contact me through directly from our website.
Okay, very good. So this afternoon, we want to thank James Clevenger, candidate for the Lane County District Attorney's race this year. He is a police officer in Oak Ridge and a licensed attorney here in Oregon and Washington State. James, we thank you for your time, your perspective, your answers, your willingness to participate in today's interview. And we'll look forward to the forum with you and our current DA, Patricia Perlow, this Thursday at 6 p.m.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Yes, sir. Have a good day.